Let me call this special meeting of the board to order at 6:33 p.m. on March the 25th. For purposes of the public, we have one topic of discussion for this evening that relates to furthering the process of identifying the district's next long-term superintendent. Mr. Hawley, our treasurer, was not available for this evening. So our first order of business is to nominate and elect a treasurer pro tem. So do we have any volunteers?
I would like to volunteer to nominate Dr. Schwetnow.
Can you volunteer to nominate me?
I'll take that as a nomination.
I'll second that.
The nomination has been seconded. Eric, any concerns or anybody else have a concern before we move to a vote?
I would be happy to serve for this very short meeting.
Okay, any other discussion before we move to a vote? Hearing none, I'll go through a roll call here. Dr. Lorenz?
Yes.
Ms. Pettit?
Yes.
Dr. Schwetnow, I assume?
Yes.
Yes. Mrs. Washburn?
Yes.
And I'll vote in the affirmative as well. So the motion to appoint Dr. Schwetnow as our treasurer pro tem has passed. With that, we should move to adoption of the board agenda. Is there a motion to do so?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Any discussion on the board agenda? If not, I think we're ready to vote on adoption of the board agenda. Dr. Schwetnow?
Yes.
I'll leave it up to you to call the roll call, I think, from this point, right?
Oh, that's a lot of stress on me. The Eileen? Mrs.
Present.
Washburn? Mrs. Pettit?
Yes.
Dr. Lawrence?
Yes.
Mr. Doherty?
Yes.
I believe it's passed.
So
I
the
thought you said we were doing a roll call, so I say yes.
So the agenda has been adopted. The first item of discussion for this evening is the superintendent search. As I mentioned at the outset, there are documents on board docs to support some of the discussion that we're going to be getting into here in a moment. But maybe if I could just do a very brief introductory statement, and we should have, let me just make sure here, we should have Bob Farrell and Bob Summers, John promoted to panelists at this time. So for everybody, the primary process tonight will really be about feedback that has been collected by CF Solutions. This is the result of a combination of surveys, of the community advisory group, use of thought exchange, et cetera. So it's primarily about initially reviewing the feedback that Bob and Bob will take us through. And the primary reason for doing all this is the creation of an important document called the Key Information Document. That again is available on board docs. The draft of it is. That's a critical document, as I said, because that's the document that will help guide the identification of candidates that will be the focus of the next phase of this process. The key elements still in need of being fleshed out in the key information document our aspirations. Those are the board aspirations, finalizing those, and finalization of the skill sets that CF will be looking for here shortly. Really, the month of April is all about identifying and doing initial screening on candidates. And then when we get into the month of May, it's reviewing those candidates and finally arriving at a final determination of the successful candidate. So tonight's a very important milestone in our process. I think I'd like to turn it over to, I think it's Bob Farrell that's going to take us initially, or Bob Summers.
I'll just start with the beginning. Good evening, board. A lot's transpired since we met with you last. We had wonderful focus groups with the classified staff, with teachers, with the administrative team, with students, with parents, and with the community advisory group. So those will share with you the results tonight, but we did want to say how wonderful it was for the people to make themselves available at such short notice. And then each of those groups, staff, teachers, administrators, did their own thought exchange after the focus group had done their part and started off the thinking for what are the qualities of the superintendent, how they should interact with you as a group, and then what was the first thing they should do to help every young child meet their full potential. So we've got a lot of feedback on that to share with you tonight, but the bulk of the work will be the key information document that and the board aspirations that Bob will take you through.
Thank you, Bob. Welcome, board members. We're going to, if you can kind of pretend that the fire department just showed up to your house and they opened up the biggest hose they got and you're trying to take a drink out of it, that's probably what it's going to feel like tonight as we go through a lot of input. But hopefully we will have digested it enough that it'll make sense to you and help you make an informed decision on the two big things we've said. One's completing your aspiration statements, and the other is to have the skill sets that you want us to go search for people that have these talents. You have documents with you on board docs, so you don't have to go with what I have on the screen, but I'll put up on the screen kind of the document that I want you to take a look at. You should see student performance at the top of a document right at the moment. We're going to skip the first little bit of the key information document that you have received earlier because we're going to come back to those two parts. That's the aspirations and skill sets. But let's roll very quickly through, well, actually, we'll roll through at your pace what we discovered. Student performance, we start with the big picture stuff that's probably not new to anybody, but to an outside candidate, these are interesting pieces of information. We've relied on the state report card from FY 2019 only because 2020 didn't really pan out. The COVID problem eliminated a lot of the state assessment data that we typically see. We are going to show you some information that we got internally that gives us hope that we've accurately portrayed where you are. Fundamentally, the NWA map and some other things that you've done internally suggest you're about exactly where you were in FY 2019. COVID probably slowed everybody down. And so most of the work we do is we talk about percentile rankings. And so we anticipate that your school will be similar to a lot of other ones. Basically, you're a district that's an A or B. A's in progress, gap closing and graduation rate. You get a B in achievement. Achievement is the high echelon measure that you're trying to look for, actual success with students. You do get a C in K-3 literacy and prepared for success. We'll talk about that, prepared for success, a little bit later. K-3 literacy, I'd be less worried about that C because it has more to do with bookkeeping than it does actual student achievement. Most of your student achievement is in this B achievement area. Academic achievement, the performance index. I don't know how familiar you are, but real quickly, the performance index is kind of like the Dow Jones of your district. It's the average, it's the culminating average of all your academic achievement measures that are measured at the state level. You earned a B rating, and we'll also look at your percentile rankings here in a little bit. Overall indicators meeting is a C, the B is the more important thing. Graduation rates, 94, 97%, that's 4 years and 6 years. Incredibly good, get an A on that one. The prepared for success, probably the best definition, there's a number of measures in there and you actually have that for FY20, but ACT participation rate, very high, 96%, but only a 55% of your students are scoring at remediation free status, and only about 2% are achieving industry credentials. So if you use those two measures as a measure of being prepared for the next steps, you got about 57% of your students that are logically prepared to take the next step without remediation and without challenges. And so there's an opportunity for improvement. We see that manifest itself. By the way, it's not a bad score, but it's one that compared to some of your other areas is a little lighter. What we see is playing itself out in college attendance and then college graduation rates, 78% and 53% respectively. And by the way, the measure 78% is what percentage of graduates attend college within 2 years of graduation from Loveland High School. And the 53% is what percentage of the folks that were graduated 6 years ago have completed a college degree. Nationally, you're probably closer to 26, 27% college completion and about 50% college attendance. So again, you're good measures, but opportunities could make progress. The reason that I feel pretty comfortable that we're telling candidates where you are in good shape, and we make the case on your NWA map data, you saw these reports come to you previously. We've pulled out 2 grade levels, 3rd grade, big key grade level, and then 8th grade. And if you kind of, the rest of the data is interesting, but the big one is the school achievement percentile. Where you stand as a percentile rank is very important to tell you whether you're making progress or not. You've had a slight decline in reading at the 3rd grade level and math at the 3rd grade level, but you also had gains at the 8th grade and was flat at the 8th grade on math, which tells me that you're running about par. You got a few ups, few downs, but overall you're very, very stable. You're obviously a high performing school. You're way up in the 80th, 90th percentiles in all cases. So,
Hey, Bob, one
Yeah.
question for you. Really triggered by that. I should probably know this, but this is new information for me. The data that says college attendance and graduation rates, and you talked about how we looked versus the national average. Any idea how we look versus what I might think of as comparable districts?
Comparable districts, you're probably reasonably competitive. Having a 78% college attendance rate is, assuming that would be of value. There's a growing body of evidence that says college should be something you do if it adds value, and you shouldn't if it doesn't add value. And the $1.5 trillion in college debt are kind of reinforcing that, people living in their parents' basements. But no, you're probably very competitive. I didn't look at individual school districts to compare yourself to, but a 78% is very high. 53% is very solid. Very
Okay,
solid.
thank you.
For a high performing district.
Thank you.
One that we wanted to point out to the candidates is a portrait of a graduate work that you've done. This is kind of a benchmark of school districts that are trying to transcend what I call the minimum standards of academic expectations in the state. If you think about college graduation requirements, state testing minimum requirements for proficiency, state measures, those are all minimum standards. They're expected of all students and everybody. So your district is moving to think about aspirational kind of measures. What do we do to make sure that our students are competitive in life, competitive and capable of doing things? So the portrait of a graduate, we've included the entire graphic in the document so that candidates know where you currently are in that important process.
Bob, one quick one on that.
Yeah.
Andrea can correct me, but I'm not sure that this is the most recent version of the commitments document. Just to quick check it.
Yep, that'd be good. I pulled this one directly from your website.
Yeah, I think we've got some newer updated wording on some of these, but I don't remember all of it, but I'm not sure this is the
I
most
think
current.
Andrea's
Again,
on
Andrea
here.
can comment on that.
Yeah, if Andrea could send me the latest version if this isn't the one. Excellent catch. Thanks, Kevin. So what's this mean? What we want to do is make a case of, and by the way, some of the data is exceptionally good. Some of the data is challenging for Loveland. The key is that you want candidates that know exactly what they're walking into and they find excitement in walking into what they're entering, both in the achievement sides, the challenges and everything else. And so our effort is to paint a very clear picture so that we attract the right candidates and the skill sets that you are looking for. 8-year trends in state performance index, you'll see that you tend to range right in that, just shy of the top 10% of the state. So very good standings, 89th percentile. There was a lower level that CAG kind of filled in. Bob, can you fill in a little bit of what was going on in this area, or at least what the CAG thought it was?
Certainly some of you could fill it in more than I could, but I do remember, and we were reminded by the CAG, the Community Advisory Group, you had that opt-out time where there was a kind of a reaction from the Loveland community to opt out of the state tests because they were seen to be unnecessary, or it's certainly the frequency of them. And so Loveland had a very organized opt-out of those tests. And we believe that was responsible for the dip that you had.
We also, that period of time, right in that range of FY13, FY14, there was a major shift in state curriculum and testing. So we saw wild variations in the percentile ranks of schools. Some of them went up, obviously. Somebody went ahead of you that wasn't there before, and others went down. For the most part, that was a result of how responsive they were to the change. And how quickly they adapted. But in your case, there are some other extenuating circumstances. But for a candidate, they look at this and they realize that they're walking into a school district that's, there's a kind of an expectation to be in the top 10%. You certainly don't want to be average. So that's in good shape. This graphic is probably, it'll look.
Can I interrupt real quick?
Yes.
Oh, never mind. Mr. Doherty's taking care of it. I just know Dr. Lorenz was having some trouble and I didn't want her to miss any key information.
Oh, okay. Are we good?
John Lape, did you see my note on this?
Kathy said she was back in. Kathy, are you here?
I am.
Okay. All clear then, Kath?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Awesome.
Bob, back
Thanks
to
for
you.
holding us up. So this little graphic looks, this is not me spilling a cup of Diet Coke on the report and forwarding it to you. By the way, that's humor. That's the best humor you get at night from retired superintendents. But so this is metric, kind of a correlation between poverty and achievement. So down across the bottom is poverty starting with 0 and going to 100%. You'll see a big line of schools that line up in a straight line. That's because state data stops at 95%. When you get to 95%, they just lock you in right there, or even if you get close to it. So there's a whole string that go through there. There's a dotted line that goes up through the document, and that dotted line is kind of a line of fit. In other words, if you were a typical school district, poverty does matter. Performance goes up as poverty goes down, but it's not a life sentence, or it's not fate that drives that, because you'll see that there's school districts that spread across this, both above and below that line of fit. You, in your case, you tend to be high performing. So by the way, up the y-axis is your performance index. So you're above the line of fit, which means that for the populations that you serve, you outperform on the norm for the state of Ohio. By the way, there's 608 dots, 608 school districts. You're up in that upper echelon. The heavy dark blue line tells you what schools are at or below your performance, and the ones that are above that are above. You'll notice that the ones that are above tend to be lower poverty rates than even you have. The CAG suggested that there's probably been an increase in poverty rates in Loveland over time. This is the best we have in the way of state data on where your poverty is. So if anything, this is even better than what you would see on the chart. However, it'll be interesting to note that there's at least one school with 95% poverty that actually outperforms Loveland. So and by the way, this is Steubenville. It's a classic dot that sits up there in the rise. And then there's a few other ones that have really high poverty that come at surprisingly high performance. We also have schools that are near you in poverty, but are actually lower performing. These are districts that look good on a report card, but actually are underperforming given the populations that they serve. So bottom line, this is a good indicator. A candidate that comes to you would be interested in saying that you are figuring out part of your challenges of poverty and making exceptions. You're not leaving it as destiny. Financial performance. I know that's a big topic in Loveland. So what we do is we ask the question, not what you spend per pupil, because I can get cost per pupil down all day long. I just fire everybody and I quit buying things, and pretty soon I can get cost per pupil down to about $50, but then no student learns anything and there's no accomplishment. So what we do is we try to connect performance with finance, because we see it as an investment. You got to make wise investments. You don't make irrational investments. In your case, you sit at a slightly above the cost per pupil of the rest of the state, and you sit quite a bit above the performance of the rest of the state. The ideal quadrant is over in here where you have high performance and low cost. So there's opportunities for improvement for you, but you're in pretty good shape. We're comparing that with all districts. There are graphics that show similar in comparison. They just have fewer dots on it, but you have the same general position. By the way, this is all state data that's easy to get. This is unique to what we do at CFED Solutions. We've spent a lot of time studying the concept of cost per successful student, not cost per student enrolled. And what we see is that for Loveland City, the money that you invest puts you at about the 81st percentile in cost effectiveness or return on investment. Certainly not a bad place to be at all. You tend to have made some improvements over the past years. What this means is that for every every student that succeeds, you spend less to get them to the success point than 80% of the other school districts in the state. And this one's a really important one for a superintendent candidate to know, because they can see how good the school has been as stewards and working towards managing their resources. You do have upward mobility. You're at the 89th percentile in academic achievement. You're at the 81st percentile in cost per successful student, but certainly on a good track. Questions on that one? I know that's a little different than what you probably have seen elsewhere. Okay. The 5-year forecast is what it is. One of the things that you'll see as you work through it, you have about 56 to 60% of your budget is on local property values, local property taxes, which makes you susceptible to the vagaries of House Bill 920 impact from the 70s on. And so candidates can see that that's going to mean that tax levies are going to be a fairly normal thing. They are for all school districts in the state, but for you, you're going to be a little more susceptible. You've had a surprising run of probably not a whole lot of growth in construction is what it appears. Kind of double check that today. There's some growth being planned, but for the most part, you're living on flat, no growth, effective mills over time. The picture is not pretty, but it's certainly not bleak. And so candidates can know that, you know, they're going to have to think about their resources and think about their money when they come. Levy passage, pretty straightforward. Most of your levies, other than the 17 mills that you went after for construction recently, most of them appear to be for managing the impact of House Bill 920. You simply about every 5 years, you got to be back to the ballot to correct for the no growth nature of property taxes. Comments, questions on any of those? Okay, student engagement. This is one of the major surveys we did. We had 386 students respond. Generally, their general life experience is very good. I've got 2 measures that we put in the report. We certainly could have a conversation with the board on more detail, but top box, we think it's important to understand who on a scale of 1 to 5 is willing to put a 5 in the box. It's a high standard. It's a continuous improvement expectation. And so we kind of push it. You do have the average rating, which most people take a look at, and you've got some very strong ratings. Probably the lowest one in the general life engagement is I can find lots of ways around any problem. So middle school and high school students are still struggling with that, trying to find that solution, but they're still at a 3.8. You got a little more opportunity in the school-related engagement. I would suggest to you that COVID has had an impact on this in a pretty big way. But this is certainly an area that a new superintendent could dig into and find the root cause of some of these lower results. Here's an interesting one. In the last 7 days, I've received recognition or praise for doing good schoolwork. Only 16% of the students could give a top box, and a 3.0 is pretty low. Overall, these are just slightly below the national averages. Again, I don't think they're out of line with anything based on the COVID impact. Did you have enough energy to get things done yesterday? 58% said yes, which was the lowest of all of these ratings. We do remind ourselves that they're high school teenagers and they tend to be tired a lot. We probably needed a few more middle schoolers, Bob, to bolster this number, but very strong. If you're in trouble, do you have someone that can count on to help? 92% top box, or in this case, it's yes and no. Do you have any health problems that keep you from doing other things, what others do at your age? 82% said no. So you've got about about 20%, 18% of your students that do have some challenges, health challenges. And we saw that show up in the thought exchange in the student areas. But overall, pretty solid, got some opportunities for improvement. We move on to staff. This is a question of continuous improvement engagement, and you'll see these captions: leadership, strategic planning, student focus, come back up in our work this evening. This is your staff. 211 responded, staff and faculty and administrators. The highest rated area that you get is educational process quality. I'm committed to my district's success. Very high, 64%, top box, a 5. I'm committed to the place. 4.6, very good score. This is good foundation work, good information to build from. Overall, this is the strongest area that you have. The second strongest area is in a student focus. I know who my most important customers are. I regularly ask them what they need. I can tell whether they're satisfied or dissatisfied. You have a few lower areas in this area, but that's fairly typical in a district that maybe hasn't spent a lot of time focused on continuous improvement and attention to the customer, which, by the way, your definition of customer may be different. Many school districts consider it the student. Some think of it as the parents. Some of them think of it as the community. The key thing would be to make those decisions and know what you're shooting for.
Bob, on this one?
Yes.
I was a little concerned when I saw this one. And it's really, I guess, the number of single digits on here.
Yeah.
And what do you see
Yeah.
out there in the world on something like this? I know what this suggests to me, but my context may be different.
So what it really says, and you see this a lot in school districts that have spent an inordinate amount of time on the details of implementation, or the how we call it. And they haven't really laid in a high quality system of the why and the what. And we see that manifest itself in the thought exchanges, Kevin. A lot of people looking for leadership, vision, forward thinking, future focused. You'll see that show up in the wording. This strategic planning is an area where it quite often manifests itself the most, but you also have some low numbers in the leadership. Of course, you've had a change in your superintendent leadership. You've had a challenge in the community. But these two here in particular, and the low scores in the mid-range stuff is an indication of a district that would really benefit from continuous improvement in innovation science, some kind of heavy strategic planning, process thinking, focus on performance, process quality, a whole series of things. Is that helpful?
It is. When I look at it, I it just kind of shouts, we want to be heard, and we want to be talked with.
Yep.
I don't know. I mean, we're coming out of this crazy year of both COVID and post-levy trauma, and it's hard to, understand those impacts on the way people feel. But I think this is critical information for future leadership in terms of what the staff is saying and what they're asking for. And I just know from my life's experience that a highly engaged workforce, the team all on the same page, drives a lot more progress than just senior leadership would be able to accomplish. You got to get people in the rowing in the same direction here.
So what you described, you see an intense focus, and in fact, what I would suggest to you that the highest performing organizations didn't skip a beat during COVID. They if anything, they would have strengthened their processes. They would have known how to communicate. They would have known how to take action. They know how to stay focused on performance. And so any of the crises that come along in a well-designed, high-performing organization will weather those storms better than most.
You know, it's not that we weren't without controversy, and we had a lot of controversy coming
Yeah.
from COVID, but I
Well-
also thought there was a lot of back and forth, and surprises
So-
a little bit.
So what I would suggest is your controversy is probably more a symptom of some of this kind of process of building leadership, building the connections, maintaining the relationships. And I think what we're seeing in this particular survey is that the faculty, staff, and administration feel that. They maybe don't know how to put that in words, but these are areas that speak to volumes about what you want to look for in the candidates that you're looking for. You want somebody that can solve these low numbers.
So this was all employees were asked,
Yes.
and 200 and what is it? Can't see this. 211
211.
responded to this, right?
Yeah, pretty good turnout overall.
Yeah.
Would you
Kevin,
do?
Kevin and Bob, but let me just chime in for a second there.
Sure.
Obviously, anytime that you have a superintendent turnover, you're going to have some drops in the scores in those questions. So
Right.
I'm sure that that's part of it. COVID certainly was challenging for all school districts, not just our own.
Yep.
But I think more than anything, I read that and I see the whiplash of our strategic plan changing dramatically in the past 2 to 3 years in the district. You know, the fact that the community didn't support the vision that was brought forward has left all of us, including the board, kind of saying, okay, well, we need to retrench this. And going back to Bob's point, you know, this is something that a new superintendent is going to be critical in helping us to shape and form.
That's right. I'll be candid for a moment, Kevin. When we look at the strategic planning that's historically been done in Loveland, it's more of tactical planning than it is strategic planning. And it's more immediate hows, programs, services, activities versus the what I need to accomplish and then choose the best how and make transitions. I can tell you that it's not atypical of school districts to feel this because it's unfamiliar territory for most school districts to think in terms of strategic planning to serve communities or students. It's not the natural feel of a public entity or an education in particular. Helpful at all?
I don't,
Yeah.
think, I don't think they feel like they've been listened to. I don't think
That's right.
they feel like they've been led. And we can find, there are a lot of excuses for that, but I don't think that teachers and staff want to hear the excuses. They just want to be part of the solution.
And I would reinforce Bob's statement. There are some really solid, exciting foundations. I am committed to my district's success, 64% top box. I mean, they're all in. There's probably a whole bunch of them. Well, with 4.6, the other 32% were a 4 or a 3. So you've got some real strength there. You also have a surprising amount of strength. There's a high percentage that have figured out who's important. And my sense is that your student achievement suggests that their focus, their natural tendencies and focuses are in the right direction. Now you just got to have somebody to lead your organization so that the organization's aligned to allow them to really prosper.
See, I see a split in the data here. If you have a few questions that speak to things that I as an individual can control.
Yes.
And I take responsibility for it, and I think I do a pretty good job about it, is what I think this is saying. I know who my most important customers are. There was a 60 in there someplace.
Yep.
I'm committed. All the other questions I don't have control over. And the message I'm hearing or seeing in here is that I'm not happy about that.
Well, I would say that I don't know where I fit. I know what I'm doing and I think I'm doing great, but I'm making those decisions, not the system. The system isn't informing me.
Yeah.
And I've watched organizations, I've had the privilege of seeing organizations transform themselves. I mean, I got to tell you, Bob Farrell in Fairfield City, I mean, that when you were there, Bob, that happened. And when those things happen, it's a glorious day to.
I think this kind of data is really exciting for a candidate because,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, I think we should point out to folks that are seeing this for the first time or will be seeing it. This is not surprising in the sense that if you haven't done this kind of research on employee attitudes before, it's usually a little bit of a shock.
Yeah.
And the good news with it, it's super good news in the sense that it's the beginning of a roadmap for you to really change some things that you may not have been aware were going on before. Especially if my experience, if you run the same survey over and over and over again down the road and see if actions that you're taking move the needle at all on some of these things.
That's right. And by the way, I'm glad you pointed that out. We got to reinforce there's no such thing as bad, accurate data. Knowing what's wrong is just as valuable as knowing what's right when you're trying to work on things. So, yeah, we always had an item on the agenda was celebrating bad news and celebrating because, and you're right, candidates will find this very, very interesting. And you should also attract the candidates that recognize that their strengths will contribute to a solution.
Mhm.
Graduation expectations, simply a comparison. This is not a value judgment, but just to give candidates a view. And Andrea, the CAG suggested that you take a look at some of the habits of success, creative know-how, and wayfinding, and give me advice on how we can fill some of that out. What I'm looking for are things that are not things that are documented, but are deployed, where some of these things are actually being expected of students and in parts. So if you could, I'd appreciate that. My apologies for announcing that right in a regular meeting, but that would be helpful. My ways, these are all state minimum expectations up here at the top. You do have an exceptionally good, you got a really high quality career technical school district in Great Oaks. And so you have great resources at your disposal in the career tech related areas. So anything you can do to help me bolster that a little bit, I'd appreciate it. Net Promoter Score. Net Promoter Score is a single question. Would you recommend Loveland City Schools to friends or colleagues? If you work in private sector, this is like all over the place. If you Google Net Promoter Score, you'll be amazed at what you find. Chick-fil-A is a 26, typically somewhere around 26, 27. And Chick-fil-A is a pretty darn good place to go eat as far as I'm concerned. It's all in the pickle, right? But the scale is 0 to 10. You take the percentage of people that give you a 9 or 10, which is basically top box, and you subtract the people that give you 0 to 6. The folks in 7 and 8 are called passives. They don't count on either end. So you have supporters, detractors, and passives. Your numbers are not exceptional. They're kind of right at the very edge of needs improvement. I'll show you right here. So overall, you're at a -6. 0 is considered good. It means about half the world is supporting you and half the world is detracting. You'll notice that your detractors slightly outweigh your promoters. You've got a really massive number of passives, and these folks are golden opportunities to move to become promoters. We actually ended up with a few more, but the way I ran the data in preparation for this report, you had 1,028 responses. Administrators scored a 38, which puts them in great terms. By the way, School districts should have their own unique scale. This is a generic scale to just give you an idea, but this is a fairly new measure to be used in school districts. We've done a lot of work on it, but we still haven't got enough volume to tell you where you are compared to other schools. Community is one that's a challenge, but it's probably not a surprise to you. A fairly small N, so take it for what it's worth, but a -22, a little bit of a challenge. Faculty at a -4, parents at a -6, staff is a 5. So administrators and staff are in pretty good shape overall, -6. The biggest one you'd worry about is this community. And again, you're looking for candidates, you're starting to get a consistent message. You're going to look for candidates that really want to engage a community and want to get connected and figure out how to solve this challenge.
Bob, can I ask you a
Questions?
question about that? This is something, a scale and a data point that I'm not familiar with. The one that stuck out to me the most was we had a tremendous number of responses from parents that were
Yes.
pretty much split, almost into thirds.
Yep.
Can you explain a little bit more about the exact question and how that came about, and any insight into why that might be the answers?
So the first rule of the data, so the question is right here: would you recommend Loveland City Schools to friends or colleagues? And so you have about 1/3 of the parents that say, no, I wouldn't recommend going to Loveland City Schools. And you got another group that say, absolutely, I would recommend the place. And then you got a group that says, well, maybe I would. I think I would. Kind of 7 and 8, 9 and 10 here, 0 to 6 here. The one thing we don't know is the question, why? So this is an indicator of where you are. The thought exchanges will start filling in some of those gaps, Eric. I think it also speaks volumes to the need to have a superintendent that can elicit and engage parents in that detractor and passive group to find out what are the root cause of the problems. And not
I'm
to
sorry.
second guess them until they get to them.
Well, and that was a little bit of my question. I'm quite frankly horrified that 1/3 of the parents in the school would say, no, I wouldn't recommend Loveland Schools. And to me, that needs more follow-up than anything you've given us so far.
Yeah. So, and I wouldn't disagree with you. This one in particular, so you have a fairly low number of students that have opted for other school options. The one thing I didn't have a chance to do was really look at how many kids are going to the college enrollment option, but there's some factors that make that real appealing from a financial standpoint. But if I had a -6 in parents, this would be an area that I'd want to look at very, very quickly. And good candidates that you're looking for should have some strategies about how to engage parents and find out why that is. Excellent point. Community is a challenge, but parents can make choices. Faculty would be the second place that I would look.
So can I ask a question too? Looking at the community category, there's only a total of 90
Yes.
survey participants there. So how valid is the -22 when we're thinking about the community as a whole? Because obviously there are far more than 90 community members, and how do we reach more people? And that part may be a question for later.
Well, and in fact, I think there's two things in this data set. One is the -22. The other one is how do we, and by the way, Brad and his team have been absolute superstars at working really hard to get engagement. I just want to say that up front. Brad has put a lot of time and effort into this, and his team and his staff. The fact that you only have 90 respondents is probably an indicator that -22 is probably well-founded, and you need to be better engaged. So, and that's not a surprise to any of you. You've had that conversation. I've heard you talk about it. again, remember what we're doing here is we're not evaluating Loveland. We're trying to paint a picture of what a superintendent candidate's going to walk into. And there are people that really love this work, and they would see this as a valuable place to put their resources and efforts to go to work. I'm not going to cover the rest of it. Doesn't hurt you all to be in the Cincinnati area these days, you know, ranked 42nd in the top 100 best cities in the United States. Loveland is certainly a beautiful place to be. We've heard nothing but positive things from CAG members, regardless of their opinions about the school. They love the community. They appreciate the relationship, long living periods of time. You've got good housing. You've got good incomes. You got good access to higher education, the arts, sports, certainly just a really good place to be. We should be able to attract candidates for you in pretty good shape. So unless there's questions, we now have to do a little bit of work. So you've seen the feedback, and we want to first go to aspiration statements. And remember that that I don't live in Loveland, I don't pay taxes there, so you can crucify any of these 5 statements because I wrote them. I tried to be true to what you had put into place. So this is your chance to really talk amongst yourselves what you would like to do. I did want to share one, this isn't it. I want to share one document with you.
What the community advisory group shared?
Yes, the community advisory group, aspirations feedback. What are your thoughts regarding the board's aspiration statements? And I did inform them that you hadn't seen them yet, that this was my writing, not your thoughts. I mean, it's your thoughts, but to not hold you accountable for anything. Here are the, and you should have that in board docs as well, but here's your feedback from the groups. I summarized it kind of, there appeared to be several indications that there was a concern there wasn't a fiscal accountability or fiscal return on investment aspiration. And Kevin, I think you and I talked about that you had put that into place, but I didn't capture it very well. The other one is a lot of interest in the CAG group around the statement of societal needs. That's again my writing, but I got from the conversation that social needs were important to you. So that one would be interesting. Many of the comments from the CAG actually were very positive in the sense that they wanted to know what the next steps are. How do you put numbers? How do you put metrics to this? How do you deploy it? How am I going to actually implement it? How about STEM? And the list went on and on. What it tells me is that they kind of liked the general gist, not necessarily the words, but general gist. So at this point, I'd just like to sit and take notes and you folks talk about what you like and dislike about the 5 items. And by the way, if we could get it to 4, that would be fantastic, but you don't have to either. What would you like? Any other help, Kevin, that you would like before you deliberate?
Bob, are you just wanting some free flow conversation about this and try to?
The big question is maybe in a big way. I actually lifted the first one from one of the highly rated ones from the Thought Exchange from the original board group, the 5 of you. Inspire, engage, and empower each student to succeed. You talked about a global society in the conversation, so I put that at the end. Be a recognized leader in responsive, innovative education. There was a word complete as well, but the number of adjectives seemed to be a little excessive. I don't I can't locate it, but I remember it very well. Somebody said, I want the students to have experiences that they fondly remember in life. I hope that wasn't me just making that up from the conversation. The CAG group thought that was a little weak, but they liked the concept, the notion that the student experience should be one that inspires them to enjoy education, not to hate it, I guess is the way to be put bluntly. Engage with the community was very well received. There was some questions around this notion of destination community, destination school system. Maybe that's too bold a word. Maybe it's one that we just simply need to explain. And then the last one, provide effective educators a supportive, meaningful, professionally uplifting environment, was again something that seemed to be important to you at the last meeting. So what would you like to look at it? Are these the 5 that make sense today? How would you write it differently? Can we simplify it?
I was going to say in the past, I believe that I can't remember what groups, I apologize to those that are listening, but there's been a problem with destination, community destination, and Dr. Lorenz, sorry, I'm putting you on the spot. I believe that you explained that really well one time, but I don't know if you remember the thought process behind it, because I think that one goes back a few years. And then in regards to E, I think after looking at the survey of the staff wanting a voice, I think that that's powerful and important to keep there included.
Well, since Eileen asked me to talk, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I really do apologize for having to join the meeting in this way. I feel very, very out of the meeting, but I appreciate Eileen's invitation about destination. And it is true that with a previous superintendent, we did have the notion that there was a concept before we did the Portrait of a Tiger, we had Destination Loveland. So there could be some drawback to the use of destination because it was in a way tied with sort of some of the building plans and some of the future places that we might have in Loveland. I think that Loveland is a destination community, and I wonder about changing the statement that it engage with the community almost because Loveland is a destination community to be sure that our school district is of the same quality, the same value, the same opinion. So in other words, people come to the Loveland community as a destination, and part of the reason they come is the Loveland School District, but we're not necessarily making the Loveland School District the destination. We are making Loveland School District something that causes the Loveland community to be a destination for people. So if that helps explain that destination notion a little, that may help refine that statement a little bit. If I
Very
could just
helpful.
continue.
I can think of ways to rewrite that for you.
And I see Eric noted that there was a clicking. Someone has told me that there's a Zoom problem when someone's using an iPhone, so I don't know if I'm causing the problem. The final thing that I would have to say is I wonder if there's a way to make a comparison between these aspiration statements and our Portrait of a Tiger, which does have some aspirations. So I'm not sure that we've captured exactly the combination or the comparison between these aspirational statements and the Portrait of a Tiger, or whether they simply complement each other. But those would be my comments.
So, Catherine, I would suggest to you that a Portrait of a Graduate is a key delivery methodology for your item A. That if you want to engage and empower students, the Portrait of a Tiger really defines what you think as a district would mean to be empowered. So they're complementary, very complementary. Other thoughts? There was one thought from the KEG that was be a recognized leader in responsive, innovative educational experiences, and put a period there. Talk to me about how excited or unexcited you are about driven by societal needs. Can we simplify that statement?
I think I'm fine with it either way, because I think whoever, I mean, putting the period after experiences, because I think that whoever we get ultimately is going to be innovative and responsive, and that includes societal needs in all of that.
You know, I think less is always more. So being more succinct makes it a more powerful statement. And the first one, to that note, I guess I'm wondering if there's a way to, I think in my mind, the students are the customers. So a lot of this should really be focused on the impact that we have on them and their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's in our Portrait of a Tiger, either the new or the old one, but there's something for me about personalizing that first statement. Empowering each student to, I'm not good with it tonight, but to realize their full potential, their personal potential. In my mind, it's about helping every kid be everything that they've ever dreamed of trying to be,
Mm-hmm.
taking themselves further than they think they can take themselves. To me, that's a great experience and a great impact on a human life. Society gains while these kids do great in the world. Society gains automatically by that. So part of me would like to see it a little more focused to the individual.
So Kevin, let me test something on you. That global society is an interesting term, easy to say but hard to define. We could say empower each student to succeed in life or to reach their full potential in life. I gathered from the conversation that you're not interested, and maybe I should ask the question. Your focus is not on what the students are doing in school at the moment, it's how successful they are in life afterwards, right?
My
Am I
comments,
right on that?
my comments are, I don't know, I'm not speaking for anybody else, but I think our job is to prepare these young people to
So
every opportunity. Go ahead, Eric.
let me take a stab at the end of A, just to see if it makes sense to anybody. To empower each student to succeed in our ever-changing society,
Ooh.
ever evolving. You know. Because it's about giving them the foundation to succeed, despite the fact that what they're being taught now may not at all be what they're dealing with 20 years from now.
I did like Kevin's suggestion about empowering each student to their full potential rather than just to succeed, but to achieve their full potential in an ever-changing global society.
Yeah, you see, that's the thing. I think that all of us have our unique gifts, and the definition of success for me is the realization of the potential of our individual gifts, whatever they are. There's quite a broad spectrum of skill sets and capabilities that we're charged with developing.
And I'm going to throw one more thing out then, and I don't want to put Andrea or Brad on the spot, but as much as this is the board aspirations for the district, I think it's important that we have kind of some administrative input into that as well. They're kind of much more boots on the ground than we are with some of these questions. Although ultimately it's, you know, a board statement. I'd like to hear the administrative outlook on the statements as well. And not necessarily right this second, you can mull it over.
I'll just run down the rest of the list. There is something about C. I don't know if I like the wording of it so much, but there's a message in C that I think is actually kind of cool. I can go remember high school. I can remember kids that had talked to kids for many years thereafter, some of whom who hated those years, some of whom loved those years, right? I mean, school is not always a great experience for kids. And unfortunately, it's represented in some of the survey data that you shared earlier. Some of that was kind of troubling as well. Kids not feeling safe and things like, maybe it's COVID, maybe you're right. I hope it is. But I think that, you know, some kids are lost in this big school experience. And teachers in particular, administrators as well, certainly, that recognize what people are feeling out there and try to make this a better experience, because a better experience is going to get better results, it's going to be more impactful in a positive way on these young people. There's something about that I do think is important. It may sound weak or whatever, but maybe that's just a wording thing, but I think there's something there. And it looks like
Bob, you didn't make that up. It was Michelle was discussing it at our last meeting, and I think she was talking about experiences that kids had and trying to make sure that it wasn't just, ugh, I'm going to school.
Right.
Michelle, can you expand on C at all? Because I think you were the closest to that statement.
I was describing that when I worked with the senior or the high school students, that a lot of them didn't like school, and it was like, do I have to come? I don't want to do this. And my response to them was, unfortunately, it's a necessary evil. And I don't want to have to say that to the kids. I want them to want to come to school every day. I want to offer those experiences that you recall 20, 30 years down the road, that by doing something.
Yeah.
It was I think each and every one of us, we can all, something pops up from school days, especially the high school years. But you go back, whether it just be an interaction with a teacher or an interaction with the lunch lady. You remember that lunch lady for 40 years. It's just, it's a combination. It's the entire staff working together to make it a desirable place to want to go, so that it's not a necessary evil, that it's a fantastic journey that these kids get to take.
I got to admit that this particular statement, you see similar kinds of statements from a lot of different boards, but C is a unique one. It is a really unique.
Keeping the student the customer.
That's
Yep.
right.
I think it's also
If I
very
could-
valuable if we're talking aspiration statements. What do we want in our next leader? And looking at the survey results of, at this school, I have the opportunity to do what I do best every day, and my school is committed to building the strength of each student. Those two were extremely, extremely low rated by our own students, and we need to hear their voice and be advocates for them, obviously. And that's a huge, huge quality that we need in our next leader, is somebody who is going to help empower them and engage them, because it goes along with what Michelle was saying, that school isn't always engaging. And I think that just goes hand in hand then with empowering our teachers and supporting them as well, because if they feel supported, if they feel involved and engaged, they're going to bring that to the kids. And that's going to start with our next leader. So I do think that that's a really important one for us to focus on in this search and building these aspirations.
Bob, I see that Brad has got his hand up.
Yeah, just a thought for you all. I don't see aspirations as being markedly different from your commitments, nor from what is in the Portrait of a Tiger. So I guess not really a concern, but just kind of a reflection is it seems like you're troubling over some of the same things that you did when you wrote your commitments. And I just wonder, as a candidate, it's which list are we following, if that makes sense.
So the board commitments tended, Brad, tended to be kind of focused and centered on the district's operation. The Portrait of a Tiger is clearly focused on making sure that students know what it is to highly be successful. These tend to be ones that you would end up being able to put metrics on as a board to say, am I making progress on big picture stuff? That's at least as I read it, that's how it plays itself out. In other words, these would be the benchmarks to tell whether or not the commitments were fully aligned and whether the Portrait of a Tiger was going to achieve the empower each student to full potential. Is that helpful or not?
It is. I guess that I would just modify my statement to say just see where those align and see if they can build upon each other. Because quite frankly, if I were a candidate looking at the quality profile, the commitments, and the portrait, those are all very powerful documents to me. Those are something that the quality profile has been around for a while, but I've not seen those other documents in other districts. So I guess that would be, like I said, how I'd modify my comment to say, just ensure that these align so one kind of feeds into the other, if that makes sense.
And at the end of the day, they have to, or one needs to be changed. My suggestion is that if the board sets out these 5, everything else has to modify to match it. And what I've seen so far in your documents in the school district, in the document level, you have some very powerful tools that are ready to deliver on these aspirations. From an execution standpoint, you have greater challenges simply because that's where you are. So what's
Is it all right if
the
I change, is it all right if I change back to that aspiration statement C to further like qualify it a little? If it is something that is unique to our district, it's probably worth keeping. It sounds like everybody has ideas of what it means. My concern is that offer student experiences that are fondly remembered throughout life does not speak to what everybody has said, that we want the school experience to be powerful and valuable and good for all our students, to include arts, to include athletics, to include good relationships with people. To me, this statement that these experiences are fondly remembered throughout life doesn't explain that aspiration. I understand what it means. I understand why we want to have it. It's just that the statement does not, to me, speak to somebody else unless all of us say all of those things that we said about it to the person who is reading statement C.
So I'm visualizing this in my mind, and I've got 2 people in my mind. There's the extremely successful entrepreneur or 2 that I've run into in life who never wanted to leave the office, couldn't wait to get back in on Monday morning. The weekend got in their way. They loved doing what they did. And then this is a true story, but we had a special needs kid someplace out in the Midwest, I think, who became the subject of a story, a video that made it around and around and around. the job that he had, he loved. He, he was a bagger and a cart attendant, and he loved it. It gave him meaning in life. The common theme in both of those was, connection to an experience. That experience drove something meaningful for them. And I think that's what we're trying to say here. Whatever it is for an individual, this is something that I look forward to, and I remember because it changed me. It fulfilled me. I learned something by being a part of it, versus, it not being remembered as a positive experience. All of us have probably got stories. While we're talking, there were two teachers from high school that I changed my life, and I see them and I can remember their impacts and our conversations. Very powerful, formative period in people's lives. We get to touch them, and help change the course. So that to me is what we're trying to say here. The words may not convey.
Does something like offer each student experiences that are fulfilling and memorable work?
Yeah, I was just trying to wordsmith too, and I came up with, and this is very rough off the cuff, offer student experience to empower, to build strength, and the opportunity to succeed every day. And then I haven't gotten to the end part, but something about how that will follow them through life. Because I feel like that incorporates the two survey questions for the students that really stood out to me as being low. And also the piece about following them throughout life and really empowering them and helping them grow.
So I think the A is a powerful leading aspiration, and it speaks volumes to the students. And every educational experience you have has to be tested against that, right? You want to empower each student to reach their full potential in an ever-changing society. Speaks volumes to what the curriculum content and everything else has to be, and what the kids need to know when they leave the doors. This C is less about the content. It's more about there appears to be some interest in it. The experience has to be valued by the student. Yeah, I need to be empowered, and I need to know how to read and write and compute, and I have to have persistence and grit and creativity. But C appeared to be something that you folks were trying to get at, that the student actually enjoyed the experience, was engaged in the experience.
Is there a way of maybe, and this gets to your point of maybe getting it to 4 instead of 5, but combining, I know you're saying they're different things, but combining A and C, maybe with something like a lead-in that says, have a lifelong impact on, did somebody say something there?
No.
Have a lifelong impact on our students through an experience that inspired them, engaged them, and empowered them to succeed in an ever-changing world, society, whatever.
I think C is more about the experiences that you experience in school outside of the book. No, it's providing different things for each student, making every student feel included.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's at least that's where I'm coming from. It's more than just about being in the books, and the academic part of it. It's about the social, emotional part of it, and finding something for everyone. And it doesn't have to be a club. It just can be we make it a point to find something for every student to have positive experiences and make it good to come to.
Yeah, you see, I'm with you. And I think the word succeed is, one of those that's in the eye of the beholder, right? A lot of times succeed means, you had a job, you had a career, you had made money, you did this and that. But success for other folks is that I enjoyed my life. I had meaningful relationships. I did important work, even though it may not be recognized. It was important work. So succeed is it's easy to say kind of the commercial version of success. It's harder to say the robust version of success, to describe the robust version of it.
So on A, I'm toying with this notion of empower each student to achieve their full potential in an ever-changing society. So taking out that word success and putting in full potential. That's what I heard a lot of conversation this evening. Am I right on that?
I have to look for shaking heads here. It works for two of us that I can see.
No, I'm fine with that too.
Okay.
I'm fine too.
Eileen? Yep.
Eileen shaking her head. Yeah.
Yeah. So A feels a little more comfortable to me. Let me suggest that I work a little bit on C.
Can I just suggest something for C? I think that when you go into the details, that's when it gets difficult. And maybe it's really just something as simple as saying offer student experiences that engage them in positive and memorable ways. It's not just saying anything about success.
Whoa, wait a minute. You got some excitement, Michelle. What did you write that down? What'd you say, Bob?
Just school isn't about all that other stuff. It's just offer student experiences that engage every student in positive and memorable ways.
Yes. I like that.
Yeah, I think that you're right. I think if we parse it out too much, it loses what we're trying to get from it.
Yeah, that's well said.
Remember what I said early on, the best aspiration statements leave a lot of work to do. They don't answer the question of how you're going to get there. And so I've got some rearranging on the engage with the community. I'm going to remove the notion of a destination school system and actually take the destination word out. It sounds like, so we'll get it. Engaging with the community to make the school district a contributing member of the community or something like that.
Kathy, is that on target for you?
Yes, I think it's very much what I was trying to say before.
Yeah. We've dropped the driven by societal needs. B is a really powerful statement. Be a recognized leader. I can put some metrics to that later on for you, but that's a powerful statement about where you want to be. And it seems consistent with a lot of feedback we got from the community, albeit they don't want you to spend much money on that, which is understandable with the challenges you've had, but they still want a school district that succeeds and leads. You don't want to be average. It doesn't, I don't find anybody who wants to be average.
You had some interesting data that you shared with us earlier about the right side of that chart with income versus performance.
Yep.
There's always exceptions to the rule or your expectations.
Amen.
If you do B, you are a premier district, you are a premier community, you're all of that. If just do that, be a recognized leader in responsive, innovative educational experiences, you're all the rest.
Yep. You'll deliver on A, you'll have C.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, the C one, the one that comes to my mind is we do a lot of work with assessment, student assessment. And one thing we found is that the number of entrepreneurs, people that are identified as entrepreneurs by their characteristics, is about 10 to 15% of the population. And it's about 75 to 80% of the population of alternative schools, which tells you that the alternative school is full of kids that are troubled. No, actually, it's full of kids that became troubled by the school systems they were in, and they were different than the rest of the world. So that C is fascinating to me. Where do you think we are? Can we move on to the next section? And I'll do some writing. I'll send it out to you, give you a chance to review them one more time, and then we'll be ready to roll. By the way, this document isn't your final written documents that are set in stone or policy. You're more than willing to make adjustments and changes. You're not at the end of the journey. You're kind of at the beginning, but you're giving candidates enough sense of where you want to be. To say you want to be a recognized leader says something, a big something to a superintendent candidate. Does that make sense, Bob? Am I hitting that about right?
Yes.
And Bob, do you feel like you can rewrite D with the feedback that Kathy gave earlier?
Yes, I can. Now, whether my pen actually cooperates with me, I don't know, but I think I can. So.
Now, we really didn't cover E very much. Is there any conversation that we need to have about that?
That's up to you.
Without E, we can't have A, B, C, and D.
Yeah, that's probably a fair assessment. All right.
Can I just make sure Brad's got his hand raised symbol out there? I don't know if that's a leftover or if he's got something additional to add. Looks like he took it down.
Yeah. So what I would like to do now, I've got my notes on this. We'll send you a final version out just to make sure that we haven't put something that you just can't live with. What we're going to go to next is the question.
I'm sorry, just from a transparency
Yes.
perspective, this document is going to be handed or provided to potential candidates, right? Or what?
That's right. It'll be posted on communications that we do. It'll be sent out to people that have interest. A lot of folks that in our role produce those trifold brochures.
Yeah.
Kind of have how many mills you got on it and
right
where the parts are.
You would start doing that in April?
We will start doing that. Our target is hopefully by Monday, we will have a full on campaign to find more candidates for you.
So for the board, I think I'm going to propose this and the board has to be comfortable with it. We're going to have to leave you with the latitude because we're not going to have another meeting by the time that you do this. We're going to have to leave you with the latitude to take the input that we've shared with you, and you'll have to do what it is you're going to do with that. Is the board comfortable with that?
Well, I was under the impression that we could still receive feedback as to an additional draft and give our own individual, if not our complete board opinion on it.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess my point would be we'll have to do it individually. We won't be able to do it as part of a meeting. So again, I'm asking the board just to be able to keep the process going, be transparent, be, the whole 9 yards about this. I suppose we can have, I might have some wording, I'll send it to you. Eric might have some wording and send it to you, and the two of you can talk. But ultimately, unless we're all together again, we don't have another opportunity to be all together again to say, the board collectively says this is okay. Tonight's really the opportunity for us to kind of give you the freedom to move on this when you need to move with it.
One thing that I could help with, Kevin, is we could actually phrase the board aspirations for the district a work in progress. And the next time we meet, you could either formalize it or continue the dialogue. Would that be helpful to the board?
It is to me.
Yeah, that sounds great to me.
Michelle, Kathy, Eileen?
I'm okay.
Yep, sounds like a plan to me.
Okay. So we'll have back and forth individually. Whatever you publish will be published as still a work in progress. And we'll have some other opportunities to finalize this down the road.
They're good. What I'd like to do next is actually to move to another document that you received late this afternoon. And it will require, there's two documents we're going to look at. First is real quickly on a tab, if you have access to the documents, on the one was a live spreadsheet. It had two tabs, skills and data collection matrix. The other one is thought exchange results. This one contains the top, and I give you the ratings. The ratings are not really transferable. Large groups tend to get lower. They tend to draw towards the mean. Smaller groups get to higher scores. For example, administrators, you had a high rating of 4.4. You don't see that in the community because there's volume. So about 1,071 people involved in the process. You can see where it was distributed. By the way, the student group actually really accelerated this week and ended up with about 705 people, and the responses were very similar. They just reinforced what was already there. But at the time that I pulled this data, there were 279, 412 community, 232 parents, 62 faculty, 65 staff, 21 administrators, so a total of 1,071. Where the rated counts came from, it was pretty evenly distributed. I kind of made it a point for the larger groups to get pretty evenly distributed. Administrators obviously had a much smaller set of thoughts, simply because they were a smaller group. What I'd like to do is quickly, what I've done is organize them around the groups. And if you see the, let me do this real quick, largest to smallest, and then A to Z. So administrators, stakeholder engagement was the highest rated one. For community, communicator, connected, honesty, leadership, track record of leading teams, future focused, integrity. By the way, the fields in green mean that they appeared as words or skill sets in multiple groupings. So not only did communicator come up very high in the community group, but it also appeared in other groups, and we'll see that. I'll organize it in that way in a minute. You see the community group, high integrity, future focused, experienced, transparent, student centered, track record of leading teams. Faculty, communicator, again, this communicator thing and honesty are two that were very, very interesting. They came up quite often. Community engagement, community relations, integrity in the faculty area were high. Student-centered and approachable, two pretty unique. They appeared in other groups, but at first on faculty. Parents able to compromise without sacrifice, future-driven, as you start seeing that word future constantly, collaborative, growth-minded, approachable. There's that word approachable again, experienced. There were several groups that identified experienced. There was a sense that you wanted somebody that had a proven track record. That's an interesting choice that the board will have to make ultimately at the end of the interview process, but it's certainly one. Student-centered, didn't get the highest rating, but it was close to the top. By the way, parents started at a 4.6 and worked their way down. Staff.
Bob, can I just interrupt you for a second? I'm sorry.
Sure.
I just like anybody else's thoughts on ability to compromise without sacrifice.
Where was that? That was parent, right?
The top of the parents.
Yeah. Able to compromise without sacrifice.
And
Now's when you wish you had, okay, who put this into thought exchange? Can you please raise your hand and have a conversation?
I'm teasing because one of the things that I feel constantly as we've dealt with COVID is that, you can only make one group happy at a time, and then another group will be less happy. Any kind of compromise involves sacrifice.
Yeah, that is an interesting statement, but it really got a lot of votes. So, and I think, to be fair, there was some narrative beyond the actual skill set that spoke to the character. There were a lot of subtle messages around, look, we need to have somebody that can take the disparate voices and bring them together and have some common language. And so I think that's probably where they were trying to articulate that.
I think that sounds like a great way to put it, and certainly a skill set that we're going to need in a superintendent.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's probably what they meant was able to communicate without sacrifice, or communicate through I don't know, but yeah, it was an interesting one.
Yeah, the sacrifice part, but it's really about bringing consensus and listening to both sides.
Yeah.
Sounds like the product of many contentious discussions.
Yes, indeed. Staff, here was an interesting, so visionary, you start seeing problem solver, visionary, approachable, that was in the parents. And by the way, these are not all the ratings, like they had hundreds of thought exchanges. These were the ones that scored at about a 4.1, 4.2 or higher. So it had to get a lot of votes, had to have a lot of support. Integrity, communicator, again, that communicator, leader, listener. Staff was an interesting group. Visionary, community engagement. You'll notice even amongst staff, there's a recognition that community engagement is going to be a big factor. Students, I got to tell you, I told Kevin, if you said, okay, you can only use one of the thought exchanges, which one you want to use? I would take the students. I tell you, you have some of the most thoughtful students. Their answers are briefer and their answers are more practical. They don't have all the rhetoric that adults gather. They were just kind of blunt, but understand student challenges. Isn't that an interesting one? Nobody else had that, but there it was. Funny and good social skills. So you will not find anybody else that says that. Community engagement, though, was their second one. Now, how's that for permeating? This thing has permeated itself all the way to students. Student engagement, they wanted somebody that would increase student engagement. And I got to tell you, that's your C, that's your aspiration statement C in its full form. Mm-hmm. Caring, committed to quality. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't remember my kids ever knowing about quality, let alone commitment to quality. And I have really good kids, but communicator, happy at their work. These are interesting, kind and understanding. Listener, an active listener, manages stress well, mature and responsible. Open-minded. So just saying that these were fascinating skill sets that they had. I'm going to group them a slightly different way. I'm going to group them A to Z, and you can see that faculty and parents both had the word approachable, collaborative, administrators and parents, communicator. You can see there were several groups that had that. Community engagement was across the board, huge variation. And the community, there was probably something in community engagement that had a slightly different word that community used. Experience. So here's one that you'll have to struggle with a little bit. Strong educational background, experienced. So a pretty broad cross section of the groups. Again, we're talking about community. 412, did 412 agree with that? No, but it got a 4.0 rating out of 5, so pretty high.
Bob, can I ask a question on that again?
Sure.
And in your experience, what does experience mean? Somebody who's been in schools for a long time, somebody who's been a superintendent in multiple other places? What exactly is being asked for there?
If you read the language, and we can dig into the subtleties of the thing, but most of them were literally wanting somebody with a track record of working with bridging community and school district, and experience with putting down a good vision, a good strategic plan. It was the very practical sense of experience. I gathered that many of them they didn't say superintendent experience, but that was implied in a lot of it. But it could have been that somebody that hadn't been a superintendent yet, but had gotten a lot of experience and a good track record of success. It connects, Eric, with the communications, the future focus, the honesty, integrity. They wanted somebody that they didn't want to guess at it. They thought you would want to find somebody that you could go sit down in a coffee shop somewhere else and find out that, yeah, this person's the real deal. Does that help?
Yeah, I think that's great. It sounds like Brad.
that could be. Future driven, future focused, growth minded. You see that across several groups. Honesty. The odd one, the staff wanted somebody that was humble. That was interesting. But integrity and honesty, you could kind of equate the two. They were different words, but lots of cross section. Leader. Look at the leader and listener. There's 3 leaders, 3 listeners, heavy dosage, several groups. Problem solver. Student-centered. Boom. And the student engagement could be the same as student-centered. Transparent was a little less, but still in 2 groups. Vision, faculty, staff, and parents. We're looking for somebody with vision. So I share that set. You've got that in your files. There's one other set that I want you to look at, and then we'll look at the feedback. What are the characteristics? I'd encourage you to look at this one and just take a few minutes. I'm going to scroll through these a little bit. You'll see much more detail. This is from the CAG. This is not a summary from the other focus groups. This is them digesting everything that we've presented you to date, plus just a little bit more. And we asked the question, what are the characteristics? We need a problem solver. Highest rated, you see nobody gave it a 2 or a 1, big numbers of 5, 14 people voting on it, 1 out of 46. We need a problem, someone who can pull in different groups with different levels of expertise and find solutions to complicated issues. So that's their number 1. Number 2, emphasis on communications, reaching out, informing, connecting, engaging staff, students, community. You've seen that over and over and over in the documents tonight. Able to communicate across the community with all stakeholders. Still, now we're getting down to a 3.9, but still look at this. All the votes were 5, 4, and 3, none in the 2s and the 1s. Unanimity in that group. Collaborative, ability to work successfully with all stakeholders. You're starting to see all stakeholders, community minded, starting to get confident, professional leadership skills, listens and makes good decisions. Good is always in the eyes of the beholder. You're starting to pick up people that are less interested in this, but still a good one. Experience, here's an example of what they summarized experience to be. successfully leading similar school districts. I can tell you that would limit your pool quite a bit, but it's certainly one that you're going to have to wrestle with as a board. Pretty high ratings, nobody in the 1 and 2, very, very high 5, 3.9 strong votes. Great communicator. You're starting to see repeats now. So that is for your use in the next phase of what we're doing. I'm not going to go, I will go clear to the bottom. It's fun to go clear to the bottom and see what somebody has offered, but most people don't agree with, or they have a differing of opinions. We need a wow person who encourages staff and keeps spending average. Lots of people said, no, that isn't what we need. Now, the reason I point that out is Bob and I have been at this long enough to know that sometimes the person that makes the best public impression people get enamored by it, but they're more show than go, if that may, or for us that spent some time in Oklahoma, all hat and no cattle. So
Yeah, it's that great interviewer but I think we ferret that out in the screening process pretty well, but it's that
yeah.
sometimes
Yeah.
that great interviewer really blows people away.
But I thought if you needed any reinforcement about that, your community and your CAG group said it. Educator who understands you don't need the latest bells and whistles to educate a child. Now, there were supporters of that and detractors, but for the most part, it scored relatively low. Now, this is the CAG, so it isn't a statistical cross-section of the community, but it is an indicate. You saw where there was huge unanimity at the top. I just wanted you to be aware of some of the lower ones. Okay, the other piece of information that I want to give you is on this next matrix. And what we've done with this sheet, and I imagine it's a little hard to see. So hopefully you can look at the one that you have on a document or on a device of your own. What we've done is we've identified a series of skills that are highly correlated with these major areas that we looked at earlier. So we've got leadership, the whole notion of leadership, strategic planning, student stakeholder focus, information management, workforce. And by the way, this is your HR, not the workforce that the students are going to. This is your own employees, the people that make things happen. Key work areas, that's instruction and curriculum and facilities and everything else. And then results, this notion of what kind of results are most important. We've taken the thought exchange feedback, are we making progress survey? That was the one that you found a lot of small numbers in the top box. Student survey, the student engagement, your student performance, the document we went over tonight that are additional from what we've already pulled out, NPS results, and your aspirational statements as we understood them at the time. And we've identified which ones looked like, for example, thought exchange, you saw the word vision, visionary. So you get a 1 next to vision, mission, and values. Communications was spoken to over and over and over. And Kevin, you and some other folks picked it up well in the Are We Making Progress? It sounds like somebody wasn't listening to them. So communications. There's a heavy dosage of performance. So future focused, performance driven, high achievement. You have aspirations statements that are high performing. And then a little bit of ethics in there as well. So these are the areas that we identified that the feedback would suggest that this is an area you should pay attention to. Doesn't mean you have to, but we're trying to digest the information. The ones in green are the ones that have the highest total counts. It's not that they're weighted or they're anything special, but it just gives you an indicator of where your attention might want to go to. By the way, that one should have been highlighted. So first question is, does it make sense to you what I'm presenting to you? And the next big thing is it useful to you?
I had to spend a little more time with it. You know, I didn't get a chance to really digest it earlier. But it totally makes sense. So thanks.
You'll notice Eric and well, all of you have identified, and we've talked about it over and over, this student and stakeholder being community and parents and staff and everybody else. This came out by no surprise at all to be your number one area that you really got to make sure they have strengths in dealing with these sorts of things. Other thoughts?
Bob, I'm trying to digest this a bit here. What? Tell me again what a one in a cell means.
It just means that the Are We Making Progress survey suggested that there were some weaknesses that would indicate that we want some skill sets to address. Or there was something in it that said this is an important skill that you want to bring to the table as a superintendent. In your case, a performance focus is you've got, you know, at the 89th percentile, you need somebody that's not going to let you get to the 60th percentile.
So this isn't quantitative. This is
Qualitative. Yeah.
qualitative. And if I go up to leadership, some 3.00, what does that mean?
That means if you wanted to look for the big areas, the biggest areas that we find across the board, this is basically the average of what these scores are. Usually most boards don't do much with these. It's more at the skill level. Although you can see that, you know, student stakeholder focus came out very, very high. Over and over and over again, you were getting indications that was important.
So the higher the sum total, the more that grouping was weighted by the respondents.
That's exactly right. Or the information that we had. Yeah. It was either
Am
an
I correct?
opportunity for improvement, or it was a key feature that people wanted to achieve and you needed to make sure you took good care of it.
Mr.
Kathy?
Summers, am I correct that we would use this information possibly in two ways? To evaluate candidate answers to questions or to evaluate candidate resumes? So we would look to see evidence or answers to these most important, the things that are weighted the highest. We would look for evidence that people are able to speak to the areas that we decide are the most heavily weighted of these skill sets.
You are correct, but there's one step in between. You're actually deciding whether, regardless of what the numbers are, which of these areas are really important to you starting out. We're going to put that as the skill sets in the document, so that's what we find candidates for. Then you're going to interview for them to make sure you see who best fits what you're thinking. That's correct. What you just said is a correct step.
It's correct, but you also.
So then you're expecting something from the board this evening, rating some of these skill sets.
That's exactly right. What we're interested in is, and we're going to pull up a thought exchange here in just a little bit and let you enter what are the skill sets, the characteristic skills and qualities that you want in your next superintendent based on this feedback. Does that make sense?
It's probably a little bit overwhelming for them to try to look at
Yeah,
all of the
that's-
skill sets and.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. I'm like, well, there's a lot for me to do right now. I think I would go back a little bit to, you know, I don't know. For me, it's too much for me to look at this and give you a specific answer as to what I want to see us, you know, in a document searching for a superintendent. Let me ask this question. How do you anticipate using the data and our responses to the data in the document that you're preparing for superintendents?
So you should see your board aspirations up there right now. If you look at the next section, priority characteristics and talents of the successful candidate, we would like to fill in about the top 10 skill
Wait,
sets or
can I
characteristics.
interrupt for a second? Eileen's computer crashed and it's going to be a minute before she gets back.
Oh, okay. Wait, Tate.
Bob, while we're waiting, presumably the 10 skills would be pulled from the assortment on that spreadsheet that you had up a moment ago?
You have 2 or 3 really high quality documents to inform. First of all, you got 4 things. One is your own opinion. That's worth a lot because you've been here, you're a board member, you're engaged, you know what's going on. So that's the first thing. The second thing, we've tried to summarize all the feedback and say these green areas are probably likely areas that you want to consider. And then you also have at your disposal the CAG advisory group, who took the time to summarize all of the other groups. And then the last one that you have is actually, you can get back to a fairly raw set of data, and that's this list right here of the various groups of what you find valuable. So we've tried to arm you with, you have your own opinion, but you also have some really high quality input along the way.
Yeah.
Bob, when you're speaking about what's highlighted in green, you're talking about the thought exchange results?
There
I
are
don't see
2.
anything highlighted.
Yeah, there's
I don't
2.
see anything highlighted in green on the superintendent skills matrix.
So the skills matrix that you're probably looking at the one that was sent earlier today.
Yes.
My apologies, I put the green over on the area detail, but if you look at the green, if you look at 4, 5, or 6 in the last column under sum, you'll see which ones would be green.
Okay.
John Late, if you could bring Eileen from the attendees over to panelist.
And Kevin, this is massive work, and we understand that, and the timeline gets very tight, but I don't want the board to feel like you want to do this well, because this is going to drive what we do. We can put the document out to start advertising, and we can flesh that out if you would want to have another board meeting so you can digest this for a while, be thoughtful about it, and re-engage sometime next week might be a better option for you. I'm just being sensitive to how hard a work this is.
Yeah, this one to me seems like it'd be a challenge to do well this quickly.
Mhm.
I'll say it for the sake of maybe saying it, but the earlier one that was the other tab on this, the thought exchange results tab.
This one?
Yeah, this to me seems like when I do this, this is gonna be my round one.
Mhm.
I think this gets to the point very quickly. And use the others to maybe make sure that I'm not missing something. But my bet would be there's so much information here. We might need a little time to digest this. So I guess the question is the impact on your process. If we're, again, we don't have a meeting from, maybe somebody has a calendar, but we don't have a meeting, I think, for a little while here. Let me look it up.
April 6th.
April 6th would work, Kevin. We can work with that. We'll take this part out. We'll make the announcements. We'll have a lot of information. We'll get lots of candidates moving. If you could put this on the agenda for April 6th, that would be ideal because it's well ahead of our target is to have do interviews of potential candidates sometime around the 3rd week of April, so that we can come back with you at the first part of May. And so that would be very doable, would not delay anything.
Kathy, you comfortable? We can make room in the April 6th agenda for that?
I think so. I think so.
Are the other board members okay with that?
Yeah, I would
decision.
like, I mean, I can throw stuff out there tonight, but I'd like a little bit more time just to look over everything.
Yeah.
I agree with Eric.
This is really important work for you to consider, because if you get this right, then you'll have the interview questions that you want. You'll be looking for the right candidates.
Do you think a thought exchange tonight might help? It doesn't end anything, but it might stimulate the thinking that you're engaged in till April 6th. If you were to do a short, it takes about 6-7 minutes to a thought exchange with the board itself on these characteristics, and actually you could, well, I don't know, as a board, they can't keep it open. So they'd have
I'm not sure that, Bob, I'm not sure that I can participate in a thought exchange and a meeting.
Oh, okay. We could do it on our phone.
I know for me, I'd like to get my thoughts organized a little bit.
Okay.
Kevin, when you're saying it could stimulate some thoughts and get some momentum behind us, is that something you think would be beneficial? Like, I know Kevin wants to read through everything, which this wouldn't prohibit that. In what way would it be beneficial to do it tonight?
I know you're being, there's so much information to digest right now, but sometimes you've just spent 2 hours with it. If you do a brainstorming, you might be interested in what other people are thinking, and the thought exchange will show that, which may give you time. It's not an end document, which is just something you do tonight, but you would have that information tonight to then think through till April 6th, say, oh, this is what the other board members are thinking.
Well, the only thing, I'd be willing to give it a try, but I would feel uncomfortable, Kathy, not being able to participate.
Oh, no, I didn't. I think Kathy should participate. I was wondering if she could still do it on her phone. Bob, if she could, I think she could still do it on her phone and still do it, but I don't know.
Yeah, the problem would be getting her access, Bob, and I was thinking real quickly is Kathy, you're not seeing any of the video capabilities in her, correct?
No, I'm not. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the problem is. I used a computer to join a Zoom meeting from this location earlier, for Loveland, so I'm sorry, I just don't know what the problem is. I also think that I probably need to leave this meeting anyway fairly soon. After having driven 10 hours today, I'm not sure that my brain is going to do much more.
Yeah. So Bob, let me make the suggestion. And if any of the other board members are in disagreement, please speak up. But I think we're generally saying, let's go and consider this, bring it back on the April 6th meeting.
Yep.
And I think we're all just going to be a little more comfortable with that. Are you both okay with that? Are you both okay with that?
We're good with
Oh,
that.
oh, yeah,
We're good with that. We're good with that. I understand.
Okay, any board members want to press ahead on it tonight?
No, I feel good. I mean, I think I could press ahead on it tonight, but I feel like I'd just be throwing things out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me just look down the list here. I can't see Michelle.
I was gonna say, I think it deserves our time to view it and make sure that we're getting it right.
Okay, Eileen,
Yeah, I'm good with waiting. That's fine.
okay.
Besides, I'm outvoted anyway. So, no.
Well, you never know. You might change everybody's mind, but
No,
You
I
could-
don't
you
want to
could-
change Kathy's mind after she drove 10 hours.
yeah.
Eileen,
Okay.
you can exchange thoughts with yourself.
I do that often.
All right, if everybody's okay, let me just suggest that we move to whatever Bob and Bob have next for us, if anything.
The only thing we have, and we can actually do that April 6th as well, is we need to set the dates for the interview cycles and everything else.
Yep.
If you want to, we had, and I think Brad had those available to you, and I don't want to put Brad on the spot.
Yeah, I think we want to talk about dates. It was the last thing on my list to raise, so we could all just get a look at calendars. and
Before you do that, Kevin, could I just want a real quick check. Was the data that we delivered to you useful to you?
Let me let the board react to that.
Yeah.
Well, no, I can say that you've done a tremendous job in giving me much more than I ever or we ever would have been able to gather by ourselves as far as making this decision. And to me, that's one of the most important decisions I can make as a board member. So anything that can make me feel more comfortable that I'm actually doing a good job makes me very happy. So thank you.
Yeah, I think the information is going to be invaluable. It's easy to work with, understandable, and I think it will be extremely important moving forward.
Michelle and Kathy?
Not only is the information good for us or excellent for us, it also gives the community or other people that are the stakeholders an opportunity to see what other stakeholders are thinking.
Great point.
Kathy?
I agree. I'm in agreement with everything that's been said so far.
And that makes 5. What I liked about it was a lot of diversity in the data. The process consolidated it, presented it to us in an orderly fashion, made it much easier to make sense of. Yeah, I think it was very helpful.
Thank you. I just wanted to confirm. It's all yours, Kevin.
Okay, just before we close, let me ask Brad or any other staff that might be listening in, Andrea, anybody that's been listening in, if you'd like to make any comments before we close this up.
No, just thank you to all of you and to Bob and Bob. It's been exciting to be a part of this process, and I've mentioned this to you before as a superintendent, kind of getting a peek behind the curtain as to how an extremely efficient and well engaged process works. It's exciting to me. It's playing out very nicely.
Thanks, Brad. Andrea, did you want to add anything? I see you're still with us there.
I'm good, thank you. I just wanted to thank everybody for their diligent work.
Thank you. I think it's important that staff has an opportunity to see this thing firsthand. And I hope you have confidence, you and the rest of the team have confidence in the process that's unfolding in front of us. So before we bring the meeting to a close, anybody else have anything that they want to raise? And if not, I suppose we can have a motion to adjourn.
Sorry, Kevin, we wanted to talk about dates, right? Or do we want to wait until April 6th?
I thought good call out, Eric. I thought we said we would wait until April 6th to talk about interview dates and all the other dates that are on that work list.
I am 100% fine on waiting, but with my schedule, the sooner I can get it on, the more likely I am to participate.
All right. How about if you let me work with Bob and Brad, and we'll publish proposed or asked for dates. We can't make any decision on it until we
Right.
are together, but maybe we get that circulating.
That's perfect.
Okay. Michelle, it looked like you were going to say something. I'm not sure.
No, I'm good. Whoop, whoop. I'm
Okay.
good.
She was going to move to adjourn.
Oh,
Move to adjourn.
exactly. I was, but I was waiting for Dave.
Is Eileen seconding?
No, I was going to ask a quick question. I won't be that person. I promise it's quick. But Bob and Bob, I asked it last time just for a status update. Have you seen an increase in interest amongst candidates?
We are seeing interest in candidates. We were waiting to kind of publicize the profile to some candidates that haven't committed yet. So I have a lot now that I can share with them that I think will be very helpful. So that after tonight, I can speak with them much more personally about what you're looking for. Even though it hasn't been decided, I still can talk to people individually.
Okay. Any other questions before we ask for a second on the motion to adjourn?
I still move to adjourn.
Okay. All right. Is there a second? Second.
Is it? I'd say, am I allowed to second and do the roll call? The
Yes,
roll
sir.
call vote. Then we'll start with Michelle. Do we need a vote for that?
Yes.
Okay, Michelle,
Yes.
Kevin,
Yes.
Eileen,
Oh, I guess so, yeah.
and Kathy.
Did you ask
Okay.
me? Yes.
Yeah, and I also vote yes. So it carries unanimously.
All right,
And
Eric,
the meeting is adjourned at 8:46.
thank you, Eric. Thank
Good
you,
night.
everybody. Good job, Bob and
you all.
Bob.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks.